Morning Glory and Evening Grace, America. It's Hugh Hewitt with United States Senator Tom Cotton on the inaugural broadcast from Boyle Radio Studios in the Kirby Center of Hillsdale College in the shadow of the Capitol. Senator Cotton just showed me his son Gabriel dressed up as a pumpkin. I'd heard he'd been a bunny, and you said he was an angel, but he wasn't a ranger.
He was both a bunny and an angel, appropriately, given his name is Gabriel. No, I wanted him to dress up as an Army Ranger, but my wife said that he couldn't. And then I told him to just grin and bear it for a few years, because as soon as he's old enough to express his own opinion and speak for himself, then we'll dress him up as a soldier.
Appropriately as a soldier. Tom Cotton, welcome. It's great to have you here on the first day of broadcast from Kirby, as we were talking about. Before the break, you promised an endorsement in the presidential race, and I'm sure that we've got Dave Weigel and Robert Costa. So, Tom Cotton, who's it going to be?
You know, there's a lot of great candidates, and I serve with a lot of them. I know a lot of them from other past endeavors. But in a race this big, when the stakes are this high, I think sometimes a guy's just got to choose. So that's why I'm proud to say that I strongly support Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary.
Here we go. Head fake, America. I thought we were going to get you today because your colleague, Cory Gardner, surprised a lot of people. Were you surprised when he endorsed Marco Rubio today?
I know that Marco and Cory are close, as I'm close to Marco, but I'm close to Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. We work together on a lot of different issues. Cory hadn't talked to me in advance of it, but certainly respect it, and I respect Marco and the service he's rendered in the Senate and the campaign he's running.
Now, the Arkansas primary, I believe, is a March 1 primary.
Yeah, we moved our primary up, actually. It's typically, for the last few decades, been in late May, but we moved it up this year to March 1 to be part of the SEC primary.
Now, I know you're not going to endorse, but give me a sense of Mike Huckabee's roots still. It's been a long time since he's been governor, but you ran two campaigns back-to-back years, one for Congress, one for Senate. How much is the Huckabee machine still around?
He's still very well respected in the party throughout the state. You know, for a long time, Arkansas was a one-party Democratic state. It really only began to move to the Republican Party over the last 6 years, with the exception of the occasional Republican officeholder. And Mike Huckabee held office as governor for 10 years as a measure of his popularity. So he's still got a lot of very strong supporters, and people feel a deep well of affection for him. And I would say that he's got to be considered the front runner in Arkansas right now.
All right. Now, I spent the morning over at the Center for New American Security and talking about aircraft carrier wings and different things like that. In the course of many of those briefings, it was said to me that Carly Fiorina's outlined a military that would cost $1.4 trillion, actually $1.6 trillion, 3 times the current DOD budget when she spoke in the second debate. Have you seen the candidates speaking realistically about plussing up military budgets, Tom Cotton? You're on armed services.
I have in many cases. In fact, Senator Rubio and I offered an amendment to the budget earlier this year. It didn't pass because of Democratic opposition, but it got a strong majority of Republican votes that would have substantially increased our defense budget, not to $1.4 trillion, which I think is probably a little higher than what's called for, and I haven't seen the Center for New American Security's analysis of Carly's proposals, but there's no doubt that we need substantial increases in our defense budget, much more than the budget deal provided last week, and those have to go not only to the urgent readiness crises we face, especially in our Army and our Marine Corps, but also to long-term investment in programs like the new Ford-class carrier, like the F-35, like the long-range strike bomber. There's a lot of desperate needs that our military has, not only to fight and win today's wars, but tomorrow's as well.
Let me ask you about those three, because I want to demonstrate to the audience something. I do not ask gotcha questions, but I expect in either the December or the March debate to ask about the Ford-class carrier, the F-35, and the new long-range bomber. And I do believe... Do you agree with me that candidates ought to be conversant with these three programs?
Those three programs, along with the Ohio-class replacement nuclear submarine, I think any candidate should be conversant because they are such a centerpiece of particularly our nuclear deterrent programs, but also our ability to control sea lanes and to project power around the world.
So what's the issue trade-off on the Ford-class carrier? I think they cost $13.5 billion apiece.
They have, and that's a lot more than they should have cost. That's a lot more than they were projected to cost. Obviously, an aircraft carrier is the largest, the most capital-intensive kind of investment we can make, even more so than, say, a ballistic missile submarine or a new fighter or a new bomber, and certainly more so than, say, a vehicle for the Army or the Marine Corps. So carriers are almost always a bespoke or custom-made kind of platform, and they take a long time to build, and technology changes a lot in those periods of time. We've had oversight hearings on the Armed Services Committee to try to make sure that the next set of carriers that we're rebuilding as we recapitalize and our entire carrier stock aren't costing that much. And also considering the possibilities of looking at the marine amphibious landing ships, especially now that the Marines have fielded the F-35B type, which is the vertical takeoff and landing, and how it can be used to supplement the traditional naval aircraft carrier.
Can we wait a long time on this debate, though, or do we have to get going?
No, we have to get going. Again, carriers are kind of a special animal just because there are so few of them and they cost so much, and they're so complicated, even more so than, say, a bomber or a fighter or a submarine. I mean, we only have aspirationally 12 carriers. Right now we're down to 10 carriers, and that's why we have a carrier gap coverage. But, we have to get back to 12, because there's the brutal carrier math of 4-to-1. It takes 4 carriers to keep one deployed in the overseas areas where we have to have carriers because of the time in transit and the time for train up and the time for maintenance and so forth. So we have to get back to 12 carriers.
All right, second question. We deployed 50 special operator forces, of which you're an alum. What do you make of 50 SOFs in Syria? They can't be there for logistics. I had someone tell me off the record today they have to be there as trigger pullers to kill bad guys, or it makes no sense.
Well, I don't want to comment on the specific mission they may or may not be performing. I'll simply say that while I have tremendous respect for all of our special operations forces, 50 soldiers in a country of 20 million people simply are not going to make a substantial difference. And it's just a continuation of Barack Obama's political decisions when it comes to troop deployments. 50 may or may not be the right number. I'm pretty sure, or it's not the right number. I can't tell you exactly what the right number is because that requires military decision-making analysis. You got to look at the capabilities you have on the ground, the end state you hope to achieve, the conditions, and then you build the case for how many troops you need. Barack Obama has a very bad habit of saying, we're only going to have 3,000 troops in Iraq. We're only going to have 10,000 troops in Afghanistan without a sound military decision. I don't advocate for a specific number of troops in any of these countries. What I advocate for is letting the military provide its best professional judgment about the number of troops and the kinds of systems they need on the ground to achieve the president's stated strategy. His stated strategy is to destroy the Islamic State. I can assure you that 50 special operation forces put in Syria are not going to substantially advance the goal of destroying the Islamic State.
I'll come back to that. Before the segment goes over, though, you mentioned that the amphibious, what did we call the amphib, allows the F-35B to take off from it. The F-35 is going to lose a huge order from Canada. The cost, therefore, is going to go up on a per-unit basis. Do you think we're committed to this, or can they do something else?
We need to be committed to the F-35 program. It's got a long and very checkered history. Some of this goes back to when I was probably in high school. It goes back to when you were just first eligible for Social Security. But
he gets one in every interview, America. Every interview, you got to look for it. You got to wait for it, like bingo.
But the simplest thing we can do to help improve the F-35 program, the simplest thing we can do to reduce our expenditures on a per-unit basis in the program and in the Pentagon procurement programs really overall is to ramp up production of the F-35. Ramp up production as quickly as possible, have multi-year purchases, allow the Pentagon to make block buys. Again, it's just like shopping. It's there's a difference between going to Walmart or in Sam's Club. You get more.
Is there support for that? That makes so much obvious sense.
There is support in the Congress, but it's the simplest thing we can do right now to salvage as much from the F-35 program as we can. It is going to be an amazing fighter aircraft.
What about extending the Hornet, the Super Hornet?
Well, that's going to have to be done for a time, at least as a bridge, until the F-35 is fully funded, and then the Navy in particular is going to need that.
Now we have 2 minutes to the break. Long-range carrier bomber. Everything that we've learned, or that you've learned, that you can do at Armed Services, are we going to repeat the same mistakes we've made with every weapon system, or are we going to compete this between two companies and pick a winner, or are we going to just go with one?
So the Pentagon actually just announced the contract award last week. It awarded it to Northrop Grumman, and Bob Gates, the former Secretary of Defense, who ran a major campaign against waste and inefficiency in Pentagon procurement, just testified in front of our committee a couple of weeks ago that when the long-range strike bomber contract was let out, he was very emphatic that the Air Force couldn't let happen with this bomber what happened with the B-2, which is that we only end up buying 20 of them because of significant cost overruns. So the Air Force in particular, the Pentagon in general, is very aware of this recurring pattern they have of cost overruns and delays that end up reducing the number of purchases, by orders of magnitude. The long-range strike bomber, I'm confident, will be an amazing weapon. It'll be a leap ahead of where the B-2 is in dealing with denied area air defenses in places like Iran or Russia or China or North Korea. But the most important thing that we do is get it through initial research, development, testing, and evaluation, and start buying it in bulk. So we get 80 or 100 of them, not 20 of them.
When we come back from break, we'll be joined in our conversation by the new Speaker of the United States who just walked in, Paul Ryan, shaking hands with Tom Cotton. It's really quite an auspicious debut for the Kirby Center on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Stay tuned, America. 21 minutes after the hour, America, Hugh Hewitt broadcasting the inaugural broadcast from the Boyle Radio Studio at the Kirby Center in Washington, D.C. I'm honored to have joined United States Senator Cotton and me, the new Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the Honorable Paul Ryan. Speaker Ryan, welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show from the Kirby Center.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back. Welcome to the Kirby Center.
You have been here on my show many, many times, but this is the most I've had the Speaker on in 5 years, so I'm very excited, and I'm going to make this a joint conversation about national defense. But first, I heard your comments on ABC. I was on ABC yesterday. A new House, a new approach. In terms of people driving around America, what does that actually mean? You talked in terms of process and regular order, but what's it really mean to the guy driving a truck tonight who's just coming home from work?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, it means we run Congress the way it was supposed to be run, the way the founders intended it to be run, number one. Number two, the guy driving the truck, his member of Congress, needs to have access to a process so that he can speak for that guy driving a truck, so that his elected representative actually has a say-so and a voice in the process. Number three, for the guy driving a truck, he's driving down this country seeing the country falling apart. He is seeing the country on the wrong track. And if you don't like the direction the country is going, which we don't, then we owe it to the country to show them how we would do things differently. Put out a very specific, bold agenda, how we would do things differently, and let the guy driving the truck decide in 2016 what he wants. We have not given the people of this nation a sufficient choice about how we should take the country going into the future. We've been an opposition party, but we have to become a proposition party. So that's why I laid out the four things that we need to do, and making Congress work better and starting over, but also being an effective opposition party and being an effective proposition party. I think those are very, very important, and that's the kind of the discussions that I had with my colleagues about going on offense, going out there and laying out a case for the country as to why we ought to have it all in 2016, the presidency and Congress. I
will talk next hour with Fred Barnes and Morton Kondracki about their brand new book, Jack Kemp, The Bleeding Heart Conservative Who Changed America. They say in this book, and it was obviously in print before you were elected Speaker or even considering it and dragged into the office, that you are his protege, that he was your mentor. Do you consider yourself a bleeding heart conservative?
Yeah, I was. Jack Kemp was my mentor, and I do believe in upward mobility and economic growth and opportunity. I am an opportunity for all conservative. Jack Kemp was the traditional conservative that believed in a strong national defense. He believed in free enterprise, not crony capitalism, free enterprise, and he believed in upward mobility. I would go to the most difficult communities in America, plagued with poverty, and listen to him evangelize about freedom and free enterprise and upward mobility and opportunity. And that's what was so fantastic about Jack, is he so deeply believed in the principles that built this country and the natural rights principles, and he wanted to communicate to people who had not had a chance to experience them why they were better for them. He took the moral high ground for the conservative movement, and along with Ronald Reagan, helped build a conservative movement that was able to capture a majority of people in this country so that we could save this country. We need a 1980-type election in 2016, and that is what we're trying to have.
No, I'm excited because at 59, Senator Cotton always makes fun of my age, and I'm happy to have him do that. But he's 37, you're 43. Jack Butler sitting behind
45.
You at 22. 45, okay, I thought 43. I am very excited, it seems to me, and I'll ask you this, Senator Cotton, that the Republicans own the generational change. Is that your experience in Arkansas and in the Senate?
Yeah, it's my experience in Arkansas, the Senate and the House for that matter. If you just look at the people who sit in the Senate and the House, most of the 30-somethings and even the 40-somethings tend to be Republicans. It's certainly the case when I served 2 years with Paul in the House and then the Senate as well. And that's for one reason, because people who are in their 20s or 30s are some of the worst or get some of the worst lot of the Obama economy. And they don't have an opportunity to get out of school, whether that's high school or a trade school or college, and get a job and move out of their parents' home and start a family. They're having to defer their lives because we don't have enough growth. They don't have enough opportunity for Americans who are trying to start off in life. Everyone's struggling, but in some ways, young people are struggling the worst. And I think they're turning to people of their generation to try to find the solutions that our generation is going to face for the next 40 or 50 years.
Let me ask you both then. Speaker Ryan, I'll start with you. At the former Secretary of State Clinton, Bernie Sanders debate, Senator Sanders, they're giving away college. I don't know how they're doing it. I paid for my kids' college, and I was glad to do it. I make a good living. I don't have to pay for it. I'm sure you guys had student loans that you had to pay off. Mm-hmm. Can we do that? I mean, did anyone not stand up and cry foul? It's $1.5 trillion.
If you think it's expensive, wait until it's free. I mean, that's a PJ O'Rourke line. But look, that's what the left does. Is the left will continue to make there's government without limit. There's never enough. Great book by a guy on your side of the country. It's never enough, and that's what the progressive movement really effectively advocates, which for is more and more entitlements, more and more government basically micromanaging these decisions for us.
So what's
and
the
offering more
Republican
unfunded liabilities and entitlements. Individual freedom, growth, opportunity, and let's take the college thing, for example.
That's what I meant.
We nationalized the student loan industry. The government nationalized the student loan industry as part of Obamacare. So why don't we denationalize the student loan industry? Why don't we go at the root cause of academic tuition inflation? And I look at healthcare and education, particularly higher education, in a similar way, which is these are parts of our economy where the prices rise a lot faster than everything else. And what is the one thing they have in common? Lots of government interference, lots of government micromanagement. So I do believe that this is yet another case in point where free market principles, transparency on price, on quality, an incentive to act on those things can bring market pressure to bear to lower prices and give us better quality. But because of government, we have these kinds of problems. So what was the left's answer? More government, no private sector, and here's the results.
Did you both watch? Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, and after nationalizing the student loan industry and eliminating private sector competition for students' business when they're trying to finance their college education, we also make it non-dischargeable in bankruptcy for students to get rid of their student loans. So the federal government eliminates its competition, drives up the prices, and won't let you discharge your loan in bankruptcy. That sounds to me like something Tony Soprano would propose.
Don't forget the $1 trillion that the taxpayers are now on the hook for with contingent liabilities.
Are we?
Yes.
I didn't know that. So when you watched Hillary Sanders, and forget the other people because I know Martin O'Malley's still around, but it's former Secretary of State Clinton and Senator Sanders. What did you hear, Speaker Wright? What's their pitch?
Well, I got to confess, I did not watch that debate. So I'm sorry. So I just want to be perfectly honest here. I did not watch the debate. But I have heard them and I've watched them. You're going to have effectively a third Obama turn. I think you're going to have identity politics. I think you're going to have a divisive kind of politics that tries to divide the electorate into certain slices so that they can get 50+1 by making lots of promises to lots of people that we have no means of financing. I
mean, just think, Hugh, about where the two parties stand. You know, the media likes to talk a lot about disarray in the Republican Party. Let's just take two examples of recent claims. We talked about disarray in the House of Representatives because there was some leadership turmoil in elections for a month. What happened? We ended up with Paul Ryan, our party's thought leader when it comes to fiscal and budget issues. Look at our presidential election. We got a lot of people running for president. What happens? We have record high ratings for debates on TV. Where are the Democrats, though? They have two candidates running for president that are credible. One is a self-avowed socialist. He openly espouses the economic theory of communism, a political system that caused the death of tens of millions of people in the 20th century. And the other one, Hillary Clinton, is trying to move as quickly as she can to the Bernie Sanders socialism position. I'd say I'd much rather be a Republican going into 2016 than a Democrat.
I'll be